Hello, Mara. Thanks so much for joining my podcast. How is it going? How are things?
Hi, Stefan. I'm good. Thanks for inviting me. I'm very excited to be here.
All right. So I have to mention it as a caveat. Looking at your profile and going into this rabbit hole of who is Mara Steyu. So I found out you gave a TEDx speech. You've done so. You had your own NGO at a very young age. You were product manager for big companies, and you studied in so many places in US and UK. So I have to say congrats.
Thank you.
And
Thank you so much.
to start off this episode, Mara, what I'm doing with my guests normally, I'm gonna kindly ask you to give a short summary for our listeners, and then I'm gonna jump in with questions, starting with your studies. We can start off with your bachelor's, then what happened in US, in UK, and what happened along the way with your initiatives, your internships, your jobs, up to where you are right now. All right.
Sounds good. Yes.
Sounds good. Okay. So
Yes.
without further ado, please give the listeners a short summary of your bio.
Sounds good. So yeah, I was born in Romania in Gherla, like it's a small town in Cluj, in Cluj County. I grew up there, went to high school there, studied like maths and informatics in high school, and then back in high school, I realized that there were not that many resources for like entrepreneurial education for high school students, like empowering them to start their own initiatives, get things done, have impact in their own community. So that's when I started iXperiment, the first startup accelerator for high school students in Romania. And I took a gap year before starting college in order to make sure that iXperiment is like sustainable, like sorted out. We had the first edition of the program. And then I went to college to the US once we had a solid team for iXperiment in Romania. In the US, I was studying in Boston at Babson College, which is very famous for its like entrepreneurship education. But I studied business and analytics and IT. And I spent my third year of college at the London School of Economics, where I studied mostly like quantitative subjects like econometrics and maths and all that. During college, I also did an internship at Microsoft. I really loved it. I got very passionate about product management, which was very much in line with my entrepreneurship background because I love building products. But I realized that I still have to learn a lot about what it takes to build products that are used by thousands of people. And I realized that Microsoft would be the perfect place to start my career towards that objective. So I joined Microsoft after graduation in their Azure data department as a product manager, and recently moved to Twitter as a product manager, and I'm in Seattle right now. So that it was a long, short summary.
Well done.
Thank you.
Lots to unpack over there. So congrats once again. And Mara, so I want to start off. Before your bachelor, you started off this Startup Accelerator in Cluj. So why is Cluj really the place to be right now in Romania? Because I have so many friends in Cluj, which started off like great companies, great accelerators. I guess, yeah.
I think so. The reason why I started in Cluj is because I lived very close to Cluj. I lived in Gherla, which is like 40 minutes from Cluj. So I was like, might as well go there and start the experiment there because it's the most convenient place for me, physically speaking. But to your second question, I think there's a lot of potential and a lot of amazing companies being created in Cluj, and the entrepreneurship ecosystem is quite booming there. Like tech ecosystem, like also the big corporations, a lot of them are there. So I think there's a lot of opportunities in Cluj, but also in Iași, Bucharest, there are many other big cities in Romania that have a lot going on. Yes. For me, it was more of like proximity choice.
Right.
Yeah.
So it was by chance.
By chance, yes. But I also love Cluj, and I think it was perfect for iXperiment, given the support we've gotten from the community. Yeah.
All right. So I have to say, I mean, you've mentioned, so you started off the Startup Accelerator, which is quite a big thing. I want to ask you why did you, I mean, how did you come up with the idea? That's one thing. And later on, because you've mentioned you took a gap year before moving out into Boston for your college, for your bachelor, which again is really mature. So I'm going to ask you on that. So I just took a note so I will not forget. So please let us know how did you come up with this Startup Accelerator? I mean, how did it happen?
Yeah. So back in high school, when I was around 10th grade, I started another initiative, like a startup, and I realized that within the education system, being a high school student myself, there was not that much support. And here I mean like relevant startup knowledge, inspiration, access to mentorship. There was nothing like that in the public education system in Romania. I was in a public high school. So I thought, what if we build a bridge between the public education system in Romania and the private system and get resources from the private system to help innovative high school students build cool projects and start their own companies and be more entrepreneurial, and regardless of whether they want to be entrepreneurs for the long term or they want to be lawyers, doctors, anything else. Like once you go through the experience of funding your own business, and once you become more entrepreneurial and more of a hustler, that will help you regardless of the career choices you'll make in the future. So my own experience kind of inspired me to start the experiment, and I also did some like high school market research in Romania and realized that yes, something like this would be really, really helpful, like having a long-term startup accelerator where high school students can actually build something and release it on the market. Yeah.
Right, cool. So how was it like in terms of, I mean, were you doing everything by yourself? Did you have a team? Did you, yeah. And how was it like? Because from my own experience, we didn't really have so many projects in high school. I mean, you know what happened at least back in the days. Yeah. So right now, this summer, I'm gonna have like 10 years reunion for my high school. So back in the days, we didn't have many projects like working in the team. We were like study mathematics, study physics. You know the drill. So in your case, did you have any? I mean, it was easy for you to come up with this initiative and actually implement it, like working with your team. How was it like?
Yeah, so there were different stakeholders that were involved and helped me a lot as I started, because I had this idea by myself, but like I needed people to build it with, and we had some amazing people. Like for instance, I worked with the New Horizons Foundation, which was the volunteering club in which I was part of, and initially they helped me test out the concept. I ran some entrepreneurship programs with them, and that helped me a lot better understand whether iXperiment was actually needed and whether high school students would actually want to be part of something like this, because they had a huge presence in high schools already. So they were very supportive and offered me a platform to start that. And actually some of the volunteers from New Horizons Foundation, like Marius, maybe you know him, they helped me set iXperiment up. So they were part of my initial core team. And back in 2016, because that's when we started, they helped me organize the first edition of the accelerator and stayed with me all throughout the way. The team changed a lot because we have many participants who go to iXperiment and then they want to become organizers for iXperiment. So like the team constantly changes. But we've had a really good, strong core team that helped a lot. So to answer your question, there were so many more people involved, and also like partners and sponsors, like the big companies in Cluj were very, very open to join us, and entrepreneurs in Cluj were very eager to be speakers in the accelerator. So there were many people involved, of course.
Right. So anyhow, I mean, I found it very mature that you came up with this initiative in high school, and I think that the ecosystem, as you said, it formed you. I mean, being in Cluj, being surrounded by startups and such.
Yes.
I mean, people sharing the same mentality. I think it had an impact on you, and
For sure.
you came up with this idea. And
it was a big factor. Yes, Cluj
okay.
was amazing for this. I got lucky there. Yeah.
All right. So you've mentioned then that it was up and running, and you took a gap year.
Yes.
How did you come up with this idea?
So I had gotten into college. I had gotten my Babson acceptance and scholarship offer before deciding to take the gap year, because initially I was just planning to go right after high school. And then this idea came up, and I had tested it a bit with this foundation that I just told you about, New Horizons. And I realized how much potential there is and how much need there is for something like this. So I reached out to Babson and kindly requested them to delay my offer and scholarship offer by 1 year, such that I can build this and bring it to life. And then once I'm going to college, I can make sure from the US that it still survives, but it's that first 1 year, it was essential for me to be there to make sure we have the right people on the ground, to make sure that we have sponsorships and everything necessary. And thankfully, Babson was very understanding. Like, Babson is the best entrepreneurship school in the world. So like, they definitely empower their students to start things and build organizations. So they were like really understanding. And they said, okay, we'll like let you start a year later. So that's how I was like, okay, then 1 year I just took to build iXperiment, to build the educational curriculum of the program, because we have 4 stages that the high school students go through, get sponsorships, mentors, all that. So that's kind of what happened.
I think, I mean, the university, they've came with the harsh realization that, oh shit, we made such a great job in admitting Mara, because I mean, she's before starting off the university, she's asking for gap year because she started off this this project. Yeah. So she's not even a student yet, but she
yes, I think they thought that, and they also, I think, all throughout the year, I actually kept them up to date on all the progress we were making, because I wanted them to realize that the fact that they allowed me to do this and all their trust in me led to such great impact in like high schools in Romania. So I made sure that they were always up to date, and they got very supportive for sure.
Right. I'm curious, do you know anyone in Romania, like from high school, that did the same thing, such as a gap year?
A gap year?
Yeah.
Not necessarily. I don't. Yeah, the gap year concept is not is not common in Romania. I've heard it's very common in the US. Once I got here, like I heard of other people doing it, but in Romania is not a thing. Yeah, and it was hard for many people to understand why I'm taking a gap year. Was the motivation behind it? Some people were like, oh, did you not get into college, so you're applying again? But that was not the case. Like, I had gotten into college way before. I just wanted to build iXperiment, but it was a strange concept for a lot of people, so I always had to explain the reasoning and all that. Yeah.
So what would you recommend to someone who's finishing off high school and either like a bachelor in between, and if finishing the bachelor, and then next is going to be the masters, what would you recommend? Is it benefit to have this gap year, and if so, why? I mean, what's your take on that?
So for me, taking the gap year was one of the best decisions I ever made. So 100%, like, if you finish high school or like bachelor and you have a cool idea like a startup initiative or anything else you'd like to explore, I think those are perfect timings, because once you get into the industry, once you get on the jobs market, it becomes a bit harder to just take a break and explore by yourself whatever you want. So I think for sure, like, if you are considering doing it but you're a bit scared to take a gap year, reach out to me. I'm happy to talk to it. But I think it's an amazing decision, and anyone should do it. However, I realize that there are people who like finish college, for instance, and they have large amounts of student debt. That's a big problem, for instance, in the US and like other places in Europe. Like, and you can't afford to take a gap year, so you need to get into the jobs market, all that. I am aware that that can be something that would interfere with that. And also for high school students, not all universities are that accommodating with the concept of a gap year. I know it happens more often in the US than in Europe. So that might also be a limiting factor. So it's good to be aware of all these aspects. But from my own experience, it's the best thing someone could do, I think, to just explore and take time to better understand themselves, start a company, things like this. Travel, yeah.
In your case, I mean, I think you were very mature. You were very mature. I mean, starting off this initiative and taking the gap year. And of course, I mean, you took the gap year, but you were in a sweet spot. I mean, you took a gap year just before starting off your university at a very prestigious school in the US. So you were really in a sweet spot.
Yeah.
Of course,
I had like a very strong plan B. I knew that was coming. So that's why I'm saying, like, it's good to be aware of all limitations. Like, can't tell anyone just take a gap year because it depends a lot on all the other circumstances. Yeah.
All right. So Mara, let's talk about Boston. So first of all, how did you decide to study business analytics and information technology? I mean, because we know, I mean, right now it's booming and it's the right place to be. So how did you come up with this idea?
So for me, I did not know once I started Babson, I did not know that that would be what I want, that I would end up studying business analytics and IT. And in the US, most students don't know what they want to study when they start college. Because one thing that I really like about the US education system is once you get into college, the first 2 years are more aimed at like exploring different topics, different subjects, and only the last 2 years you kind of focus towards a major, minor, all that. And I really like that. In Europe, things are very different. When you apply to college, you have to tell them what you're applying for. So for me, I was like, I know I want to do more business, entrepreneurship. I want to continue running my own initiative back in Romania and potentially build all that stuff. So like at Babson, that was my first motivation for joining Babson, and that was my initial plan. But then as I went through college, I realized that as an entrepreneur, you need to be able to build stuff yourself, and you can't always depend on engineers. And if you work with engineers, like, they have to trust you, they have to understand that you have technical knowledge. So I was like, I definitely need more computer science knowledge. So I like cross-registered at Wellesley College, where I took more computer science classes. At Babson, I did mainly quantitative subjects as part of the IT and business analytics concentration. So yeah, like as I went through college, I realized how important technical mathematical skills are. And as I went, I added these 2 topics, but I did not know initially. That was what I ended up studying. Yeah.
So once again, I mean, how did you find out that it's nice? For example, you transcended, like in the engineer's shoes, and you said, okay, from the technical perspective, from an engineer point of view, I have to get some technical knowledge. So you got into this quantitative quantitative world. So I mean, it was all by yourself, it was, I mean, it boils down to this question. I think at the end of the day, is it gut feeling more than anything else when it comes to choosing somehow the direction that you want to follow? Yeah, I mean,
for me, it was a lot about what my gut instinct told me. I knew that, but I was thinking, okay, what do I want to do in the long term? I know that I want to build products and services that help other people. And iXperiment was just the beginning for that. And it was an NGO, and I did not need any technical experience in order to do that. But I knew I wanted to move more towards building products that have an impact in society. And in order to do that, it became obvious that technical skills were really, really important for that. So that's why I decided, okay, I should take some computer science classes. I should take IT, business analytics, and get more into that realm and focus more towards like engineering. Like also now, like I don't have to code, like, but it helps me a lot when I work with engineers to have them trust me. So like, yeah, it's been the right decision. I'm really happy that I chose to focus more on the technical side of entrepreneurship as I was in college.
You are right into the money, I would say.
Yeah, I guess it happened that the decision made sense also from that perspective. Yes, but it was not the first. It was not the first concern. Yeah.
No, for me that's refreshing to hear your thought process, because I mean, again, you showed like really great maturity, and this leads me to the next question. I mean, what would be your piece of advice for someone who is who's supposed to choose the university? I mean, because I had, even on my podcast, I had people talking about, okay, before I started my university, I really like did an assessment, and I was paying attention to what's gonna be next. So for example, if I'm gonna study in London or in Copenhagen, I'm gonna check the job market, and I'm gonna see if, first of all, the culture, it makes sense for me, if I'm gonna establish myself there. And then of course, what's gonna be the industry that I'm gonna tap into it once I finish my studies. So again, you gave me your insight when it comes to this gut feeling more than anything else. But would you have a method to recommend for someone who is choosing the studies, be it bachelor's or master's? Broad general question, yeah. So
yeah, no, it's a very good question. I think my response stays within the same lines. I would think, okay, where do I want to be in 10, 20 years, and then reverse engineer to what I need to do today in order to get there in 10 to 20 years. That's what I did, and it did work for me. But I realized that a lot of high school students, they don't know where they want to be in 10, 20 years, and that's fine. And a lot of like college students, they don't know where to go to masters because they don't know. So like, I totally understand that would be a big limitation, and that's why it makes a lot of sense to make sure you experience as much as possible right now. Take a gap year, try something new. Like if you feel like you still haven't found your area, like taking some time to explore, that makes a lot of sense. But assuming you found that, and I was really lucky to find this like while I was still in high school, because that's when I realized how much I love to like build products that people use and find useful products or services, like on this entrepreneurialism. Once you have that, once you know where you want to be in 20 years, just reverse engineer and set up all the steps to kind of get you there, and be very intentional and say no to anything else that's not in that path. That would be the advice.
I love it. I mean, first of all, yeah, just one note here. Basically, you are wearing the product manager hat. I mean, you already like establishing roadmaps. You have
Yeah.
to where you see yourself in 10 years, reverse engineering, tuck. That's already nice. So you already gave us a flavor of what product management means. Which is,
I have a very PM approach to everything. And I think it works in most areas of life, but in some areas I should learn to let that go. I'm still working on that.
No worries, because I have strategy consultants on my podcast as well, and we've discussed. I have like Angie, a friend of mine, and she was planning her wedding as a consultant using spreadsheets, using Kanban.
Wow, I love that.
All right, and you've mentioned another cool thing, having intent. So
yes.
I mean, that's quite powerful again, because nowadays, even at myself, I see it, be it in when I'm doing my day-to-day job, be it in my free time. Maybe I'm doing things without intent. For example, if I'm gonna learn a new language, maybe I'm gonna do the actions, I'm gonna do the steps, but I'm not gonna put my intent into that. So maybe it's gonna be more difficult for me. How do you find this intent? I mean, in your case, If does it make sense? My question. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it does. That's very interesting. I think the way I do it, and I know it can be very different for everyone, is like I don't only do things that I love, but I rather learn to love the things that I have to do and do. So like once I start something that I know like it will help me, but I don't particularly like it, I try to learn how to love that thing. And once I learn how to love that thing, it's very easy to be intentional and stick to it. So that's usually my process. And I don't know, like be very simple, like learning a new language. You're giving an example, like I go on Duolingo and like those daily tasks like kind of make me sure that like I always like every day at like 8 p.m. I go on Duolingo and complete it. Like very intentional. And like initially I was like, is this really needed? But like, oh, this is fun. Like trying to look at the positives and love it. And once you love something, like it's very easy to be intentional. But you need to get yourself to enjoying it, because a lot of people say, oh, I don't like this, I'll just stop doing this because like life is short, all that. And I am pro that, but sometimes these things are really relevant in helping you getting to again the end goal in like 10-20 years. Is like you have to learn to love those things and then to be intentional. Does this make sense?
Yeah, of course, absolutely. Basically, I mean, I love what you're saying, falling in love with the process and make it, I mean, stick to it. Because, yeah, I mean, not, I like it. Mara, so again, I'm going to come back to the studies, but maybe we're going to touch like wider circles here. And I want to, because we stumbled upon this like language being intentional. When, for example, in my case, when I'm not at my best, I'm in a hurry. I don't know if it makes sense. For example, even at a side project, be it this podcast, for example, if I'm not at my best, I'm putting intent into it, doing the research for my guest, making the slides, maybe putting some editing into the episode. If I'm not gonna do that, I'm gonna hurry myself, which is okay. I'm not gonna spend that much time in preparing a short introduction and presenting the guest, which of course I'm doing all the time, particularly with my guests in my podcast. But I've seen it on myself. So when I'm not on my best, I might be in a hurry, which is somehow I'm on autopilot, which somehow I'm losing that intent, if it makes sense. Did it happen to you, for example, when you are not intentional? And I know you have this, it looks like you have this all the time, you have these goals. Speaking of if what you see in 10 years, the reverse engineering. So I assume you have these goals. And does it happen for you to somehow not being intentional and being in a hurry, which translates into switching on this autopilot? For example, okay, I know where I want to go, being a product manager, for example, but somehow you're not gonna put all the effort into it. You're gonna leave it. Okay, I've built upon this point. Maybe it's from now onwards, it's gonna be compound interest. So everything that I've done so far, I'm gonna let it on autopilot, and I'm not gonna put that much effort into it. Again, broad general question. I don't know if it makes sense where I'm gonna.
I think it does.
To sum up, what do you do when you see yourself like somehow losing this intent in doing things? How do you get back to being intentional?
So there are two situations when this idea of like losing intent happen. Like there are two scenarios in which this has happened to me before. Sometimes I lose intent and I just do things in a hurry and like not paying too much attention, and kind of what you said. And then the end result of that action is mediocre. It's like bad. It's like and I'm upset about it and I don't like it. And I think like, why is that? And then I get back to this idea of like, where do I want to be in 10-20 years? And I realized that one thing had nothing to do with my long-term goal. And I should have rather just said no to doing that thing from the beginning, rather than starting it and doing it in a bad way. Because like my mind kind of knew that like this is not aligned with my long-term path. I'm just doing it to not upset other people or like for some other reason. But like I internally know this won't be helpful for me, for other people, like given where I'm heading. So does this make sense? Like I'm sometimes unintentional just because on the back of my head, I know I should not be doing that thing, but I just said yes to not upset other people. So what I'm trying to do on that side is like, if I know I don't have time and energy and there's not much relevance to something, I should just say no from the beginning rather than do it in a poor way. So I'm still working on learning to say no to things, and that's hard, but I think it's a very important lesson. And so that's one of the scenarios in which I lose this intent. Another scenario is like things are relevant and they do align with my long-term goals and they help other people, all that, but I still lose intent because I'm tired, because like I need a mental health break, all that. So then I like take a step back, try to get realigned, like take a break, like a vacation, 1 day of holiday, and then get back to it and find that intent and do it successfully. Because I don't accept for myself doing something below average. So that's kind of what I would do in that scenario. Does this make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And
Yeah.
I love it when I mean, being picky, it's good.
It's fine to not do everything with intent, as long as you realize it and assess and see where that fits in your life. And then if needed, just take a break, give yourself time, and then get back to it in a much better shape. Like don't fight against yourself or like put yourself down for not always being 10 out of 10. Yeah.
Right. Let's jump ship. In fact, let's go back to university. How was it like? How was it like the period in Boston? How was it like from the cultural point of view, from the studies? Was it because so you don't have any study experience in Romania, for example, right? It was straight out of college. Yeah. So you started off your bachelor. How? Yeah. Maybe you kept in touch with your friends from Cluj, for example. How do you perceive your bachelor experience? Because it's like in the US, which is the education system is one of the best. How was it like from your perspective?
Yeah, I absolutely loved it. It was a big shock because it's very different from Romania as a whole, as a culture, not just the education system, but everything. And it was the first time I went to the US. Like before moving to the US, I had never visited the US. So it was quite a cultural shock, but in a positive way. I was like, okay, this is my place. This actually really fits my personality so well. So it was not a shock in any negative way. I was just surprised how amazing this is. Like I love the US culture and the way people work here, the education system structure. I prefer the US education system to the European one. And we can get to that in a later question as well. So it was a positive shock, I would say, like the openness, the transparency, like the drive for success, which I sometimes don't see in the Romanian public education system. The talking about values, what was really interesting, like in the US, whenever before you start an exam, you have to sign an honor code in which you say that you are not going to cheat, you are not going to, and they trust you. So it's not like they look at you and like punish you, all that. Like you sign an honor code and they trust you. Like in the Romanian education system, no one talks about honor, no one talks about what your values are. So like that was a new thing. Initially I was like, what do you mean through values? Like, and they started talking to us about like integrity, respect, all that in like the first week of school. That was like the orientation. So like, wow, that's like, I feel like we really need that in the Romanian education system.
Nice perspective. And I think it's mature because even once you get in the corporate environment, you stumbled upon these values, these morals, code of conduct, and everything.
Yeah.
which I think I see it's aligned somehow, the educational system with what happens next, at least from this perspective. And Mara, tell me about, I mean, working, for example, exams. Did you have like the classical exams, or did you have like group projects, case studies? How was it like from this perspective?
So the exams were pretty like, so basically like at the end of each semester, you would have like the final exams, like midterm exams. They were quite intense, very theoretical, but so overall the US education system is very practical, specifically Babson. Like in our first year of college, we had to start our own businesses, and for that class, the grades were based on the performance of the businesses we were running.
Wow.
So everything was heavily like business oriented, very applied, not theoretical. But the exams, specifically the exams, they were theoretical. So you really needed to like study all throughout the semester. You couldn't like do it like in the last 2-3 nights before the exam, because they would actually test your knowledge, like, and put you in hypothetical scenarios. It's not like you learn by heart the definition and then you write it in the exam. No, they would actually test actual knowledge more than definitions, which is one more thing that I really like about the US education system.
Cool. I mean, skin in the game, huh?
Exactly. Yes.
All right. Love that. Mara, so, okay, you've mentioned this. I mean, you came to the realization that you have to pick up with to ramp up your technical skills. And so you've mentioned already like quantitative side of things. And I know this is what you studied in your period wide in London. So how did you end up in London? tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so at Babson, most of the students spend their third year or a semester of their third year in a different country. So like traveling abroad for studying is very common in the US. For me, it was like double abroad because I was already abroad in the US. But out of all the offerings that Babson had for like their partner schools that we could study, London School of Economics specifically attracted me because I knew it was a very prestigious school on one side, but also I really wanted to understand the European education system, since in the end I'm European and I should know like how courses are being run in Europe. I was really curious. So that's kind of how I decided to go to London and also like be closer to family for a year. Yes, and I loved it. It was just heavily more theoretical than the US. Heavily more theoretical, not that much applied, not that much practice. Like there was no experience of starting your own like initiative or business as a part of a class, not that much group work, more like individual theoretical studying, which is different. That works for some people better than the US system. For me, I think I prefer the US approach more, given my personality and like style of learning.
Cool. What about, so the product management, was it on the radar even while in London, or it was afterwards?
While in London, I applied for a product management internship at Microsoft.
Right.
So it was that's kind of when I started to consider product management. And how I started considering product management was basically I kind of realized that yes, I love building initiatives, product services, but I don't know so I know what it takes to identify a problem in my community and test and make sure that problem is relevant and that it's worth to build something and solve that problem at a small scale. That's kind of what I did with iXperiment. But I realized that I don't know how to scale that solution to like thousands of people, like how to operate at scale, how to build impact at scale. So that's why I started considering working in a big technology company that builds products for like thousands, millions of people, so that I could understand like how do you build stuff that impacts such a wide range of users. So that's kind of how I started considering product management in a big tech company. And I really love Microsoft as a company. So that's why I applied there.
Right. Right. So while in London, you are starting considering product management, and first of all, I mean, that's me. I really admire the Anglo-Saxon systems when it comes to business, when it comes to schools. I think they're the best. So Boston, London, well done. For me, it's the pinnacle, the pinnacle of when it comes to education, and particularly in your area. I mean, your tech product management. I think you're right into. I mean, the one of the best places. I'm curious. Before moving on, did you see? I mean, what was the main, let's say, the main go-to when it comes to jobs for students in London compared to your peers in Boston? Did you see any difference?
I found it way more competitive in London than in Boston, which was unexpected because like in Boston, you have Harvard, MIT, like all these students going for the same jobs. But in London, I find it way more competitive, specifically LSE. It's an amazing school, but heavily competitive. And whenever, like, for instance, the career services, they would host like a jobs fair where like companies would come, talk to students, like get their CVs, all that. There was always a limited number of spots you would have for one fair, but quite large because these were huge. They would get filled up like within 2 minutes of being announced on the website. It was crazy. I had never experienced something like that in Boston. So I felt like it was way more competitive, like way more students competing for a smaller amount of opportunities. That's what I felt in London. But everyone, all of them were super driven. Maybe what I noticed also was more focused towards finance, business, development, and consulting. Consulting was a big choice, and less towards tech product management. And even me, when I was in London, I did some consulting initiatives. I did participating in some program with Bain. So like I was still considering consulting as well, just because everyone was doing that in London. Yeah.
Right. So you played a bit with like banking, consulting, which again for me it's very mature because you are in London at this prestigious school. You see that people that are surrounding you, they jump into consulting and banking because that's London. Everyone knows. And you, for example, that's for me like pure intelligence, adaptability, right? So you see what's happening. Okay, let me at least give it a try myself. So you went a bit into that direction, consulting and banking, which for me, I mean, again, it's very mature. Let's move on. Okay, so this is because for me, I mean, make no mistake, for me, I love like the French education system. I know I love what's happening in Germany, in Austria, and so on, like in Europe. But for me, really, the UK and US, especially London and places like that, for me, I really admire, because maybe I'm wrong, but this is what you have in those places, like this competitivity, which really pushes you to become the best.
You have to.
Yeah.
If you want to have a job, yes.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So Mara, let's jump ship. Let's go back. Let's cross the Atlantic and let's go back to the States.
Yes.
So what's happening next? You have this internship from Microsoft, or you jump directly into being a full-time product manager?
So I had the internship because in London I was still in my third year, and I would have a fourth year back in the US. So between my third and fourth year, I did an internship at Microsoft in Boston, back in Boston. It was an amazing program. It's the Microsoft Garage. So basically, they selected a bunch of students, and we created teams, like one product manager, one designer, and 5 or 6 software developers. And Microsoft full-time employees will come to pitch us with ideas, and all of us each team would select one idea they would like to implement, all the way from ideation, because nothing was done, so from zero, to market launch within a summer. So it was like very entrepreneurial, like kind of build a business by yourself in a student team, but like all with Microsoft support and resources. So I absolutely loved it. And that's kind of how I fell in love with Microsoft and decided that I want to be in this company full-time after graduation. So after graduation, I became a product manager in Asic Data.
Right. So tell me a little bit about that. Why Azure Data? Yeah, I mean, if again you had a say into it, I mean, if it was your choice, and because I mean it deals with data science, right? It means it deals with data, and I think I know it's quite a hype nowadays with everything that deals with data. So I would have two questions here. First of all, how is it like being a product manager for a tech company? Here again, we are speaking about Microsoft, which is one of the best. So that would be one question, and then a question about the area itself, like Azure Data, and is it fair enough to call it like data science, or is it more on the like more technical, more infrastructure side of data science?
Yeah. I think I can start with the second question to set context, and then go into the first question, which is more about product management in this org. So for Azure Data, so Azure Data is huge within Microsoft. You have different departments, like you have the databases, data warehouses, like ETL, data integration services. It's like a huge organization. For me, I was specifically within the databases section, more specifically in Azure SQL. So one reason why I was really excited about it was because I would get to remember what I was mentioning. Like I wanted to see what it takes to build and maintain products at scale. Like SQL Server is like used everywhere. Like if you think of scale, it's hard to imagine something else that would be like bigger than SQL Server. It's like massive. So it like kind of checked that requirement of mine to understand how to build and maintain products at that scale. And when you build a SQL Server on Azure specifically, it was even more exciting for me because I would get a chance to understand like cloud fundamentals, like everything, the cloud infrastructure, how Azure works. So it was like the intersection between these two areas made it really exciting for me to be a PM in Azure SQL. And I was mainly focusing on data replication technology. So like how to synchronize data between databases, how to transfer data, how to replicate data, all that. So does that respond to the second question in terms of like the area and the context in which I operated?
Right. I'm curious so when it comes to working with your peers, I assume you're working with, so being a product manager, you are working with engineers, software engineers, you are working with business analysts, or you are working with clients being maybe internal clients, like someone from the business. I'm curious because often I hear about working in an agile way, but when it comes to data science, do you think, first question, did you work in an agile way, like delivering in agile sprints? And do you think it's feasible to implement such a framework? Yeah, let's call it framework. When we deal with data.
So I think the way I see agile from a PM perspective is a way of building products, and regardless, you can have products in data, you can have other types of products, like it's a framework for how you build those products regardless of what the products are. So that's how I saw it, and I try to be as agile as possible. Of course, there are limitations in the sense like SQL Server has its own like product characteristics that you have to make sure to comply with. Like you might not have as much flexibility as you would have in other areas, but like the product development methodology, it can be and it should be agile and not waterfall, right? So that's kind of how I saw everything, and I try to be as agile as possible while building these products. And it was not data science necessarily. So basically I was building products that like database products that were being used by like really big enterprise customers. So
Right.
We also had data scientists that would like
Right.
run models and do data science work. But for me, I would just do what a PM would do in a social media in any other company. It's just the nature of the product differ. Like the types of customers were different. The limitations around how the product should look like behave were different, but the methodology was, and I always try to be agile. Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, we can conclude that it can be agnostic. I mean, this agility can apply to any type of product or project, whatever we have to deliver. Of course, with its own limitation. With
Yes.
I
would say it's agnostic in most cases. Maybe there are like big legacy systems, I don't know, like that don't allow you, and there are like, I don't know, maybe government security, things like this, that those types of products can't allow you to be agile, scrappy, and like deploy quick, learn, improve, all that. You have to do a lot of like research and all that before you start anything, and like waterfall, all that. So it might be that there are situations in which that doesn't apply, but in my case, agile did apply, and I try to apply it as much as possible. Yeah.
That was like a personal question. I was just curious about that. Is it true? Is it true, Mara, that the product manager is the CEO, like the how should we call it, like the mini CEO or the CEO of the product?
Of the product, you see it like that. It's very important to clarify that as a PM, you have no authority over people, over anyone else. It's just you only have authority over what should be built, what should be prioritized, because you as a PM really you should understand your customers, like who they are, what they really need, what their pain points are, what are the jobs to be done. So based on that knowledge that you have to be able to prioritize what to build and when. So in that case, you could see yourself as a CEO of the product, but yeah.
Right. So we are coming up with a roadmap, coming up with a set of priorities, and it makes sense. I'm curious now, what would be the at least top 3 skills that a product manager should have? I mean, another question, I guess, are you more like a technical product manager or like a business product manager? I mean, I guess it boils down to each organization, but in Microsoft, for example, would you define yourself as a technical product manager or more as a biz ops product manager?
For Microsoft specifically, and even in my current role, I think it's all technical product manager. That's how I define it. Yeah. Also because of the nature of the products we built in Azure Data, those were heavily engineering focused products. Like one of the products would just be used by running T-SQL statements. All that. So it's like you have to, that's how the equivalent in the industry for the role I had was like technical product manager. Yeah. But there's a lot of like business input as part of that as well. It's just like you're more heavily focused towards like working closely with engineers and driving the engineering work.
Right. For me, I see it anyhow. I mean, again, you're right into the money with being a product manager, because I see even, I mean, speaking of London and consulting, I see so many consultants, consultants from like McKinsey or companies like that, joining either a tech startup or these big tech companies working as product managers. And I think, again, you are in a sweet spot. You are in the role itself, the company, of course, but also the place to be. I mean, Seattle, US. Again, what a nice
Thank you.
situation.
I think what's interesting on the consulting side, I see product management being very similar to consulting, because you still have to like deeply understand the problem, think of a solution, plan the solution. But PM is a bit more than consulting in the sense that you also build the solution for the customer. As a consultant, you propose the solution and then the customer implements it. as a PM, you also build it. Yeah.
So you just gave me the answer of if I would have to ask like a consultant, why would you join a tech company working as a product manager? That would be like the answer,
That's
because
the
I want to
answer.
see, I want to be there for the implementation as well, and I want to build stuff, not just recommend like something.
Yes. Yeah, that's pretty much it. And I think as a PM, having consulting experience is very, very valuable for sure. Yeah.
All right. So Mara, speaking of, I mean, from your perspective, what would you say would be top 3 skills that help you out throughout, I mean, in delivering like products, being successful from your day-to-day job?
Yeah. I think for me personally, the first one was being entrepreneurial, and like, because if you're entrepreneurial, you have a bias towards impact and getting things done and moving fast. And I think as a product manager, like building things, moving fast, like shipping features quickly, even though they are not in a perfect state, but rather shipping, getting customer input, improving them, and then shipping again. I think that's very, very, very valuable. So like being entrepreneurial, scrappy, customer obsession, all of this would fall under the entrepreneurialism umbrella. And I would say this is the most important, by far the most important aspect that helped me as a PM so far. The second one was like having technical understanding. And here what I mean is like, I'm not expected to write code. I don't have to write code, but like being able to understand code, being able to talk with engineers, because like you work really closely with software developers, so like being able to have a good conversations with them such that they trust you, that's really, really important. And also being able to translate customer requirements into engineering requirements, that's really, really important. So I would say being technical helps as well, even though you don't have to write code, but understanding code. And if you take some CS classes, I think that really helps as well. And the third one, I would say communication and like soft skills, like, I don't know, like caring about people, like about your team as a PM, like when you're in a bigger meeting, making sure that your people have the chance to speak, like being a good communicator and just like nice and kind to people, that helps a lot, I would say, as in anything, but also as a
honestly, I find you very outgoing. I mean, even on this podcast, it's so easy for me to like to pour out myself, you know, like I mean, I think it would be
good to hear. Yeah.
As a product manager, I think it would be such a pleasure. I mean, working with a product manager as like you. Honestly, that's the first impression that you gave me from this podcast, and indeed, I think you do a good job. Eventually you jump ship from Microsoft to Twitter, being a product manager, which this says a lot. So I think you indeed you do a great job as a product manager.
Thank you. Yeah, and what I would add on that topic of like communication and being open to people, like also not taking feedback personally and like encouraging, if I do a bad job, just tell me as soon as possible so that I can improve and I won't take that personal. So I think like having that trust with your team and like that expectation of open communication, open feedback, actionable feedback, I think that's really important there as well. So that's kind of what I would add as part of the third.
Yeah, there it is. I mean, I think that's very useful and that's very important because I see it in my team, for example. I think so. It's what you said. I mean, of course, communication, especially when working in tech and being a product manager or business analyst, translating these like customer requirements into like technical requirements. So we have like a good understanding of what we have to deliver and what the client needs. I think that's very, very nicely said. Communication, of course, but this what you said. I mean, being honest and having a feedback, so we don't take things personally, because eventually we are in the same team and we are working towards the main
common goal.
Exactly. Nicely put. And for me, it resonates so much because I see it like day to day, and
yeah, it is frustrating. Yeah.
Yeah, nicely. I really do think you do a good job as a product manager. And I'm curious, do you somehow mentor other like interns or someone who is less senior than you?
I have a bunch of mentors myself.
Yeah.
I don't have mentees as of now, no.
Because you strike to me
I'm
as...
happy to mentor others if I get asked. I still see myself as like still having to learn so much more. But like I'm happy to help. Like whenever I get questions or ask for help, I'm always happy and very responsive. But constantly speaking, I have mentors, but not really mentees. Yes.
I'm saying this because you strike to me as a person who, I mean, it's not your first time when giving, not advice. Let's call it like that. What you just said, like having these skills that you have to that a product manager needs to have. I think it strikes to me it's not your first time when you are talking about that, and maybe it's not your... In fact, okay, I meant to ask if it's your first podcast, but I'm so stupid because you gave like a TED talk. So
I've done some other talks in which I talk about part of the things that I'm talking now, but some of the things I'm mentioning, this is the first time I'm talking about them, and I'm really enjoying it. So yeah.
all right, because yeah, I mean, so I think you communicate quite well. I mean, very well in like how verbally. I think you are doing quite a nice job. So that would be like a real-time feedback on my podcast.
Thanks for the feedback. You're doing a great job facilitating this cool discussion. Yes.
I do appreciate Mara. All right. So moving on. So what's next? So we talked about being a product manager at Microsoft, and we know you recently jumped ship into another company, which I mean, I think it's like media, it's all over the news, like what happened with Elon Musk. So you are a product manager working for Twitter. Why did it happen? How did you end up working for Twitter this time?
Yeah. So I absolutely loved my time in Microsoft, and while I was a PM there, I had a chance to like build more back-end enterprise products. And as a product manager, I knew I wanted to also expand the breadth of my experience, and I wanted to also try out more front-end consumer products. So that's kind of that was kind of the motivator behind this switch, because in my role at Twitter, I have an opportunity to explore this new area, because I just want to like experience as much as possible as I'm starting now my career, to kind of better understand what type of products suit me better, what type of products I love building and all that. So I love backend enterprise, but I wanted to try front-end consumer as well. So I started at Twitter about 3 weeks ago in my new role. I'm a product manager in their developer platform.
Cool. Well, good luck. I'm sure you will do. At least the same good job you've done at Microsoft. I want to touch upon this topic of networking and having mentors, because it strikes to me either your intuition is on point, because you made like a good decision when it comes to the field of study. The location that you've been, you've been in Boston in Babson College, you've been in London and Seattle. So for me somehow, this says a lot, and I find it quite, it's not if not difficult, almost I would say like very like lucky if you didn't have any mentors, anyone who guided you. All right, so tell me a little bit about that. How did you find those mentors? How difficult it is to reach out to people to ask for advice in terms of like university, in terms of jobs and so
on? I do have a lot of people who have helped me a lot on my way here, like starting with my parents, who've always been so supportive for whatever crazy idea I had. They were incredibly supportive and always like empowered me to strive for more. in terms of like mentors specifically, I had many mentors ever since high school. Like these would be people that I would meet at conferences, people that I would get introduced to, and I would be like, oh wow, this person is really smart, and I would be like, their background is very aligned to where I want to be in the next few years, like 10, 20 years. So I just want to keep in touch with them. And like, I would often ask people like, would you like to be my mentor? Would you like to set up monthly recurring calls and like just stay in touch? I asked like so many people if they want to be my mentor, and no one ever said no. So I think the big lesson is like, just go ahead and ask people. People are more happy to help than you would think. Like even in iXperiment, like we have an activity in which we have high school students go to people and ask apparently crazy stuff, and they are the team that gets most no's wins, because we want to make sure that students are comfortable asking for what they need and also like comfortable with being told no. And one of the common lessons that students come up with after this activity is always that people say yes way more often than you would expect. So that's a really good lesson for life. And also when it comes to asking people if they like to be your mentor, like, because you often tend to think, oh, these people are so successful, so busy, so like they have other priorities. But no, like if you ask them, like nine out of 10, they'll say, yes, I'd love to be your mentor and to help and have recurring calls and all that. So I would just ask people, yeah.
I love it because this is what I preach on my podcast as well. I mean, I had it already in so many episodes, because one time while listening to this podcast, it was someone speaking about what's networking, and why is it useful to network, and it went like this, something along those lines of, strangers have the thing you want in life.
So, strangers have the thing you want in life.
And it boils down to this like don't be afraid to reach out and ask people for that one thing you want. For example, okay, I want to be a product manager. You are a product manager. Let's have calls or whatever, a coffee, and where you're gonna explain what a product manager does and so on.
Exactly. But it's also like networking is, apart from everything you said, I totally agree with. And on top of that is like, whenever others reach out to you, you also have the duty to like talk as much and always say yes and help. So it's like, it's mutually beneficial relationships, the networking, right? Because sometimes you would think like, oh, like this famous person, like this investor, how could I help them? Like they can help me in another. But then you would be surprised like how you can help people yourself. So it's always important to like always make clear that you're always there for them as well and to help in any way possible. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I love that this is what, I mean, you've been taught to do that, to reach out to people. And also, I mean, you've of course you've discovered that people are so willingly to say yes, and also to be accustomed to with having a no in front of the eyes. I think it's so simple, but yet, I mean, why don't we do that? Like, why don't we do that since high school?
Because in our minds, we invent reasons to not do it. Yeah.
Honestly, I mean, I see it even on my podcast today, because I have, for example, I had this year in January, I had on my podcast Edward Rozanov, for example, who is I don't know if you know the person, but it's like when it comes to real estate, because I had no one when it comes to real estate, and I thought, okay, I should have Edward Rozanov, and we had the same high school, so somehow I did my due diligence, right? So I knew how to reach out to him, to have like a common point, and I mean, of course you have to,
it helps,
of course. But I was amazed, because I mean, I texted him, and the same day we just scheduled the meeting, and of course, why not? I mean, he was so I mean, he said yes without any hesitation.
That's awesome. It's kind of very much connected to like what we just talked about, right?
Absolutely. So simple but significant. I love what you said. All right, so that's about networking, that's about mentors. I mean, tell me how. Of course, we have to reach out. We have to ask questions. We shall not be afraid. But for example, once you left, for example, Cluj to go to US, it was someone from high school that you reach out to, for example, to ask, how did you come up with Babson College, for example?
Oh, with Babson specifically. So I had done my startup back in high school, and I wanted to make sure that I would end up in a college, university that would empower me to build things and support me to build things while studying. So that was for sure my intention. And then I was encouraged by college application counselor to give Babson a look because it was the best entrepreneurship school. So once I heard about it, once I saw and did some research into it, I was like, wow, this is exactly what I need. So that's kind of how it all happened. Yeah.
Right. And what about Microsoft and Twitter, for example? How did you navigate those? Did you have any mentor who is a product manager, or like how did you?
So I did get a lot of good advice around product management. I did not have like a long-term mentor, like from college all the way to now, who's been a product manager. So I did not have that. I kind of discovered by myself that I'd like to explore product management. And then I connected with different PMs from all these companies, learned more, because like the PM role varies a lot from company to company, even from team to team.
Right.
So I connected with a lot of people from these companies to better understand what the role entails in their company, team, all that, and just applied to a bunch of companies. And it happened that I got accepted at Microsoft.
Right. Right. So I love it, Mara. I meant to ask because, of course, seeing your background, there's no, of course, at the first sight, there's no place for failure. But I wonder if it happened to you, and if you can share something with us, with the listeners, whoever, if we have any listeners up to this point, about failure. Because in entrepreneurship, living abroad, moving from one place to another, it might be difficult sometimes. And we might have these periods of lows.
Yeah.
And let's call them failures. How do you deal with those? What's your mechanism? What's your coping mechanism?
Yeah. I have failed many times. Like, for instance, when I would apply to jobs, like when I applied to Microsoft, I also applied to like 30 other jobs that said no to me. When I applied for internships, similar story. I'm still figuring out how to deal with it because I'm not very good at dealing with failure. I'm just like, okay, I'm obviously trying to learn, like whenever there's a challenge or an impasse, I'm trying to come up with a solution instantly, and which is my PM instinct, and that does not always help. And trying to say, okay, what can I learn in the future such that this doesn't happen anymore? But like, I'm still trying to get better at handling failure and like taking a moment to step back and not jump into things and like dramatize things or like be very like sad or emotional about things. So I'm like still learning about it. I don't have the right answer to your question, but like maybe to summarize things, I would say like, what are the lessons learned? What did I do? I try to give myself feedback and to be very honest about what I did and where I made a mistake. And if there were other people involved, definitely apologize and all that. So
right,
all these things, but I'm still trying to come up with a better way.
Yeah. All right. So, Mara, because I want to be respectful to your time. I know it's already like on my side, at least it's 11.
On your side, it's
11. Do you have like a hard stop, or do you have 10 more minutes?
Yes. So I had a plan at 2 p.m., but I pushed it to 2:30. Now it's 2:15.
Okay, so 10 more minutes. I meant to ask, do you have how did you stay up to date, for example, when it comes to product management? Do you have any go-to when it comes to books, when it comes to source of information?
When it comes to books, one book that helped me a lot as I was getting into product management was Cracking the PM Interview. That really helped me a lot. Other books that helped me as a PM, like startup books, like 0 to 1 was amazing. The Lean Startup was amazing. Like Shoe Dog was amazing. Like all the business, they help you as a PM, because like all the entrepreneurship books apply to PM as well. As a PM, you're basically an intrapreneur. You build stuff within a big company. It's very similar. Yeah, so that's what I would say about books. I do have mentors, and usually on Fridays I have several mentorship calls. Like I set up recurring monthly calls with people from like either different teams within my company, externally as well, and ask for help on an ongoing basis. So that helps as well. In terms of like, yeah, I would say these are the main resources that I use.
Right. Cool. So we've touched upon many topics like education, projects, failures. I think there's your overnight success, quote unquote. Yeah, overnight, because yeah, people might think of you have like an overnight success, but we all know, I mean, what does it mean? Because even you've mentioned this book, like Cracking the PM. I know the book for software engineers, which I think is the same. And I mean, the book, I don't have it here, but I have the book, for example, for software engineers, and it's like quite a big one. So yeah, books, networking, projects, moving from one place to another. That would be your quote unquote overnight success. So we are preaching about here, like skin in the game. Yeah, everything.
Yeah.
We can summarize that. That's your overnight success.
Oh, and yes.
I wanna end up with this question, Mara. Again, broad general question. If you would have a piece of advice for we can use this cliche for your younger self, or for anyone who wants to break into product manager, or just life in general, yeah, be it moving abroad, living in another country. There's a broad general question, yeah. If you have any piece of advice, please share it with our listeners.
Yeah, I have more pieces of advice. I guess one of the advice is kind of what we just discussed about, like in your career as a PM as well, like asking for help is very, very important. And like, don't make stories in your head that people are too busy for you, or that. Just go ahead and ask for help. Of course, be very intentional and do all your research before, and be very clear why you are asking for help. But once you know that, like, just go out and ask. And if you are told no, that's fine. Like, what's the worst that could happen? You're just being like, what's the worst that could happen if you ask for help? You're just being told no, which is kind of the state that you are at right now, right? So like, there's nothing to lose. So that's one big thing that I would say. Second of all, like, do kind of try to identify the things that you're scared of and do those. So like, if you're like, oh, like moving to this place is quite tricky because I don't know people, all that. And like, I would say, go do it, and you will most probably succeed at it. And the fact that you can do it and succeed at it will be such an amazing lesson, because anytime in the future when you have to do a scary thing, you'd be like, oh, if I could do that years ago and it worked out well, then I can do this. So it's like, I would say, like, go for the things that scare you and try to face them. That's right. Another one. Yeah, and I think this idea of like where you want to be in like 10, 20 years, and reverse engineer and make sure that everything you do is more or less aligned with that, and say no to anything that would detract you from that. However, there's a fine line, because when you're very young, like, who knows, maybe you want to pivot and go on another path for the next 10 to 20 years, and you don't want to say no to new opportunities. So it's like a very fine line before identifying sticking to one path and also trying alternative things. So maybe in your like early years, I would say it's fine if you try alternate paths as well, like give yourself the flexibility, but overall try to define for yourself the long-term path and stick to it, but be flexible. So yeah, that's what I wanted to add to that piece of advice.
Excellent, Mara. Again, I do appreciate being so candid on
Thank you. This was really interesting.
On my pod. Cool stuff. And I mean, who knows? I mean, as long as it concerns me, I see you like in a few years, like the next president. I mean, having your own NGO, having all this.
I love that. Romania.
Who knows? Huh? It's that saying. Whenever you go visit a place, for example, you should, of course, you have like a note with at least I don't know 10 points to visit, but you should never cross-check all the points, just to have reasons to come back in that place. So this is why, for example, in my case, if maybe I forgot some questions to ask, maybe I'm gonna take a note and I'm gonna ask you with 100%. The next occasion, with the next occasion we're gonna meet on my pod, because I'm sure you're gonna accomplish way more things.
I hope so. I hope that will happen, because I'm like a bit concerned. I'm like, oh my God, I'm stagnating. I'm old. What's happening?
Right. And let's call it a day. I do appreciate, again, being so candid and sharing all this information. And could keep
Thank you so much, and thanks for running this like awesome discussion and the overall podcast. Like, it's super helpful. Thank you so much.